Good start.
Welcome to the CBD Market Insights webinar from Headset. I know people are virtually filing into the room, so come on in, make yourself comfortable, and we'll get started in just a minute. Actually, 2 minutes. I know folks are still filing into the room, so once again, come on in, make yourself comfortable. We're going to get started in 1 minute. Okay, let's get started. Welcome. I'm Steve Bloom from the Customer Success Management team here at Headset. Welcome. If you're curious about the current state of the CBD market, if you're planning to hitch your wagon to the meteoric rise of this curious molecule, you've come to the right place. You will have questions during today's webinar. Please put them in the appropriate window in your Zoom and we'll handle some of them at the end. Any questions we don't answer, we'll follow up with in writing after the session. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I wanted to set the context for everyone here by briefly covering the Headset ecosystem. Let's move on to that slide. Our retailer application is used by cannabis retailers, displaying data from their point of sale and visualizing trends by store, by category, and by vendor. Inventory managers use it for sizing orders correctly, and it gives you the perfect overall framework for managing your business based on data. Bridge is our vendor-managed inventory application. It's used by vendors and distributors to manage the retailer side, the retail side of the supply chain. Bridge helps vendors keep their retailer inventory at the Goldilocks level, and it helps them measure the impact of vendor days and special events. When our customers use Bridge and retailer, their customers are much more likely to go home with what they came in for. Now, Bridge and retailer are both BYO data. It's your data from your business. But Insights is completely different. It lets you analyze data from across all categories and all segments. Today, you can choose from 9 categories across 4 states, California, Washington, Colorado, and Nevada. Now, whether you're analyzing pricing trends by segment or looking to analyze different brands or determine how to make your own brand stand out, Insights can help you identify and capitalize on market opportunities. And here to talk about the opportunity with cannabidiol is Liz Connors. Welcome, Liz.
Thanks, Steve. Happy to be here.
And I know you've got an exciting announcement for us in your presentation, so I don't want to steal your thunder on that one.
I appreciate that.
Folks, Liz is our Director of Analytics, and all of us like working with her because we always learn something. Liz, tell us a little bit about your history and how you came to us here at Headset.
For sure, absolutely. Steve, I started working with Headset over 3 years ago. I was initially drawn to the company because the data is a really interesting and comprehensive set of data from all sorts of different places. It was pretty unique to anything I'd ever seen. Aside from the data itself, I was really drawn to the industry because it's growing so fast, but it is in this very data-starved environment. Headset has a really inspiring mission to help people from small to large businesses alike use data to make better decisions. And to me, that was a really inspiring mission. I personally have made my whole career in data and really do passionately believe that with data, we can all perform better. And I wanted to align myself with a company that was really pushing that forward. Before Headset, I was working in CPG retail, analyzing very boring things like vitamins and paper towels. So today I can honestly say I really look forward to my job. I come in and analyze things like blunts and edibles, much more interesting days.
Yeah, we'll skip the paper towels and go straight to the cannabidiol.
For sure, yeah, and I'm glad that you can say the name of that. I have an Elmer Fudd moment every time I try to say it. I get too many consonants in there for sure.
Well, you've already done all of the research for our industry report, so why don't you take us from the most recent one and take it away from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I might not be able to say the molecule, but I promise you I can analyze it. And thanks for the call out to our industry report there, Steve. We do spend a lot of time, even before we get to analyzing the data, to decide what topics to cover in these reports each month. We try to focus on trends that are hyper-relevant to our subscribers, as well as the industry as a whole. Last month, this led us to write a report on the CBD market. This report got a lot of attention. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to download it. You can find this report and all the other ones we have written at headset.io/industry-reports. That is on the screen there for you, so you don't have to remember it. Just to give some spoilers about the report, no, I won't spoil the end of Game of Thrones, but if you haven't finished it, you should. You're a little behind. So just to spoil this report for you, we have a few key takeaways. Those are that we found that CBD-containing products are growing very fast. In fact, they're growing faster. In fact, they're growing faster than their THC-only containing counterparts. We found that in general, CBD products command higher price points than those that only have THC. And finally, we did a mini dive into the edibles category, not a deep dive, more of a shallow dive that lifeguards hate. And there we found that mints and gummies are more dominated by CBD products than others. After publishing this report, we got a lot of feedback. People loved the insights given, but wanted to know more. So we spent the last month analyzing this market further, and today, rather than going through the CBD report from last month, which you can read on your own, we're going to dive deeper into the CBD market to discover new and interesting trends in the space and try to give you some idea about the future analysis that you might want to do in this space.
Okay, there we go.
Before we get started on this road trip today, I'd like to give you some rules of the road. Always before diving into any analysis, I think it's important to start by defining the data that's in the driver's seat. So for our CBD market analysis today, we'll be using data collected from our participating retailers' point-of-sale systems. This data and all insights data at Headset has been anonymized, machine learned, algorithmed, forecasted, to reflect total market trends for recreational marijuana dispensaries in our insights states. Right now, Insights is offered in Washington, California, Colorado, and Nevada. And the sales numbers that you'll see today and anytime you're using Insights reflect retail sales dollars after discounts but before taxes in each state. For this particular analysis, we are comparing the sales of CBD products to THC-only products. After careful thought at Headset, we decided to classify CBD products as non-inhalable products that contain any amount of CBD. For us, non-inhalable products comprise 5 of our 9 main categories. Those categories are beverages, capsules, edibles, tinctures and sublinguals, and topicals. Rather than draw an arbitrary line for CBD products based on either their THC to CBD ratio or their milligrams of CBD, we decided that any product that contains CBD will be considered a CBD-containing product. We break down our analysis by CBD to THC ratio and the total milligrams of CBD in various places to help you get a better picture of these products. Finally, we don't distinguish between hemp-derived or marijuana-derived CBD. It's often not disclosed on products, and we find that in general, consumers tend to think of a product as a CBD product regardless of its source. This brings me to talk about our strategic alliance with Nielsen. As we talk about our data today, the data we're examining here is Headset CBD market data. While this data is a very large piece of the CBD market, it's not the complete pie. Our data is transactional-based data for recreational marijuana dispensaries in our 4 insight states. In contrast, the team at Nielsen covers sales data for hemp-derived CBD products sold at traditional mainstream retailers. Here you can think of things like drugstores and grocery stores from around the country. In addition to this transaction data, they have survey data where they cover topics like need states, usage occasions, perceptions, motivations, and measurement of consumer trends in CBD products at these traditional retail outlets. If you're interested in learning more about our data or Nielsen's data, there is contact info at the end of this presentation. All right, so with the rules of the road out of the way, let's get started on this journey. Before I just pack you in the car and take you with me, let me tell you the plan for where I'd like to take you. We'll start our story today with the CBD market as a whole, the market size of each of our 4 insight states, as well as the growth of CBD products. Next, we'll dive into category trends to examine how each category contributes to the growth of CBD sales and which categories are seeing more rapid changes in trends. From there, I want to dive into a single market. For today's journey, I've chosen Nevada. This market is a bit of a Goldilocks spot for me, not too new, not too old. There's still a lot of growth to follow, and I think it will give us a good idea of overall trends. Plus, I found some interesting nuances that I think are important for us to understand and analyze, and perhaps this will spark future ideas for other analysis. Finally, I'll end our journey today by examining some pricing and packaging trends to see if we can discover why CBD sales are growing and which types of products offer us good future opportunities. Without further ado, let's get this journey started. I'm sure I don't have to convince anyone attending this webinar today that CBD is a hot consumer trend. I think we have probably all been approached by someone recently asking us if we know anything about CBD products. I myself was approached by both of my grandmothers recently asking me about CBD products. There's very little in this world that those 2 women can agree on, but it appears that the CBD trend is one of them. At Headset, however, we consider ourselves a high-quality, quantitatively focused analytics company, so we rarely rely on a sample of just my own 2 grandmothers to diagnose a true consumer trend. Instead, to get to the root of this consumer trend, we're going to start with not our data, but Google's data. Google publishes free data about consumer trends, which is a handy tool for getting a pulse of the consumer marketplace. So let's dive into the murky and scary world of internet search history. Here, looking at the relative search interest for the term CBD, and I don't want to dig too much into what relative search interest is. I encourage you to Google it, which would show up in the Google Relative Search Index for Google Relative Search Index, very meta. Anyway, here, suffice to know that what we see is that the interest is increasing and has been since 2015. Let me put a line on here so that you can see where 2015 is a bit easier. Though in 2015 we see interest was relatively low, starting in 2016, there was a notable upward trend. In fact, if we look closer, we see that the trend has increased even more rapidly in 2018. Let me put another line for you here. Looking at the chart as a whole, we see that the search interest has started to follow a pretty classical exponential growth trend. In fact, month-over-month interest in CBD has risen by 7% each month since 2016. These search trends are a good gauge of consumer interest. However, they may not translate to dollar volumes. Let's dive a little deeper and see if consumers are putting their money where their mouth is, or I suppose in this case where their search queries are, by examining the sales volume of CBD products in our insight state. Now let's look at those sales volumes. Before you panic, folks, that 2019 bar is a year-to-date bar. There is no need for panic, no need for dogs and cats living together, no mass hysteria, we're fine. In fact, we're better than fine, it turns out. In 2018, we see the total sales volume for CBD-containing products in our 4 states was $244 million. Already this year, more than halfway through, 7/12 of the way through to be exact, I was an auditor in a prior life, that's coming out here, so 7/12 of the way through, or 58%, we see that the sales volume is already 72% of 2018. Given these 2 numbers, we can fully expect this year to far surpass last year. Looking a bit more closely at the individual states, I'd like to point out that just like its persona, California is the sunniest of the states, with its CBD sales this year already being 84% as high as last year. Let's dig a little deeper. We'll get a better picture of the overall market growth by examining the total sales of CBD products and their market share over time. Here in this graph, we can see the total CBD sales volume on the left-hand y-axis, represented by the light blue bars. We see that there was a considerable spike in January of 2018, which we know was driven by California's adult use market opening up. We saw pretty healthy sales growth throughout 2018, with sales growing by over 50% from January to June. In 2019, we have a more muted sales growth, though still an upward trend line. There is where we see sales growing by a few percentage points month over month. Reminder, I pulled this data yesterday, so the last bar on there is the month of July because we do have real-time data. However, since I pulled it before the end of the day yesterday, my July data was missing 3 days, the 29th, the 30th, and the 31st. 3 days is about 10% of the month, so we can expect this number to increase throughout the next few days. And it is my opinion that that CBD sales volume number will continue to grow and will probably suppress that March number, with July being the highest CBD sales volume we've seen so far. What I want to point out about this growth is that the growth isn't just the overall growth of the market. CBD products could be growing, but it could just be the cannabis space. In order to get a better idea of that trend, let's look at the market share. What we see is that CBD products are increasing their share of the pie, meaning that CBD products are growing faster than their THC-only counterparts. To see this, we can look to the dark blue line on the right-hand axis. This represents the sales market share of CBD products. Remember that we are only looking at non-inhalable categories here, not all of recreational cannabis. So in our non-inhalable categories, we see that the current market share sits at around 33%. The reason I brought up market share here is to point out that these CBD-containing products are gaining market share on their THC-only counterparts. Now let's take a look at the forces that are driving this growth. One of the things I like to do when analyzing positive or negative sales trends is to diagnose the root cause. If we think about top-line sales, we know that there are two contributing factors to overall sales volume. The first is the total units purchased, and the next is the average item price of those units. In this case, with sales volumes increasing, let's examine if those sales increases are due to people buying more stuff or people buying the same stuff at higher prices, or perhaps, and most likely, a combination of the two. Looking at this graph, we will first look at the dark blue line, which is the most interesting place to start. This line is the CBD product unit volume share. Before we were looking at sales share, now we're looking at the unit volume share, or the percent of total units sold. This appears to be the primary force driving our sales volume increases, with unit share increasing from 8% in 2016 to 25% this month. We do see increases in average item price as well, with the average item price climbing 20% from 2016 to today. It appears that unit volume growth, however, is our primary force that's driving the increase in top-line sales, so the force is quite strong with this one. Average item price does contribute to growth, though it's less of a Luke Skywalker here. The force, not so strong. So to recap, we see very healthy growth in CBD products, particularly as they relate to their THC-only counterparts. Further, we know this growth is driven by an increase in prices and growing unit share. Let's dig a little deeper into the sales trends, though. The next stop on this CBD road trip is to take a look at the categories that make up these sales and see if we can find some interesting trends there. Remember, for this CBD analysis, we're looking only at non-inhalable categories, so that's beverages, capsules, edibles, tinctures and sublinguals, and topicals. Here we're looking at CBD sales in each individual category. This graph is year-to-date numbers. First, let's look at the bright blue bars, which are represented by the left-hand y-axis. The bright blue bars are the total year-to-date sales for CBD products in each category. Firstly, what I want to note here is the largest category in terms of dollar volume in the CBD product space is edibles, with $62 million in sales so far this year. We can also see that tinctures and sublinguals, as well as topicals, are major players in the space, with $56 million and $41 million this year respectively. Something that's really interesting to me about this chart is the comparison of total sales volume to each category's CBD product market share. If we look at the dark blue bar, whose axis is on the right-hand y-axis, we see that edibles have the largest dollar volume contribution to CBD sales, but CBD products make up less than 20% of the edibles category. We can look at this in contrast to categories like topicals. In topicals, we see that total sales for CBD products this year come in at just over $40 million. But within the topicals category, sales are over 80% to CBD products. Two very different categories here. There are some other ones that I didn't really mention. If we look at the graph, we can see both beverages and capsules, more minor players, with capsules being more heavily dominated by CBD products than beverages. So before I go and pick a category to really dive into, what I want to see is, are the trends on this chart, which are year-to-date trends, have they been stable over time or have they been changing? Let's look at the sales market share of each category over time to pick where we'll go next. Here we are looking at the market share of CBD products within each category over time. I'd like to spend a bit of time on this chart and really dissect some of the trends. Firstly, I'd like to briefly look at edibles and beverages. Edibles are the orange line on the bottom of the graph, and beverages are the purple line. Looks like they're one of the 3 purple lines. I'll try to do better color contrasting in the future. They are the purple line just above the orange edible line. So what we see here is that, like we saw in the previous CBD chart, CBD products are a small portion of edible space. However, this trend is steadily increasing. Here we see that CBD products in the edible category have grown in sales market share from around 8% of the market in 2016 to nearly 20% today. This category seems like one to keep an eye on over time. If you're interested in more information about CBD products in the edible space, I encourage you to download our CBD industry report. Since we do have some information already in that industry report, I'm going to move on and look at some other categories. Let's move to beverages next, which again is that purple line just above the orange one. Beverages appear to have a higher portion of their sales to CBD products than edibles, and this has remained consistent over time. However, if we look at more recent data, it appears that CBD-containing beverages are losing sales share to their THC-only counterparts. In recent months, this is a trend that we looked into. In some markets, we see that new products in beverages, in the beverages space, favor a THC-only experience. That's not to say that there aren't new products with CBD, just that the trend has started to favor THC-only products in those recent months. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over capsules here, which we saw before on the previous slide. Capsules were a pretty small category. Let's instead dig into tinctures and topicals. Those are the 2 lines at the top of the chart. Tinctures and sublinguals are the bright purple line, and topicals are the deep red line. Both of these categories currently see over 80% of their sales volume to CBD products, but the trend lines are pretty different. We see that topicals out the gate was dominated by CBD-containing products, with over 50% of sales, even in early 2016, to CBD products. Their trend line has been mostly upward, but has moved at a slower pace than tinctures and sublinguals. In the tinctures and sublingual space, we see that CBD-containing products have really been upping their share of the pie, with this trend seeming to stabilize at what appears to be a sweet spot of about 80%. Now we see topicals and tinctures and sublinguals both locked in place, with some changes each month between the winners. To me, I think the story I want to dig in here today is topicals. Let's look at that steady growth trend and see if we can figure out what's driving it forward. Does that sound like a good next stop on the road trip to you, Steve?
I'm with you. I'm also amazed at the head and shoulders lead that tincture and sublingual and topicals have over the other categories. It's very impressive. I'm glad you agree, because I did build all the slides around topicals. It'd be a real curveball. For sure. So now that Steve and I agree, we'll move on. All right, so now that we've settled into this topical category, let's first examine the sales trends in each state to see if there's a good story to follow in one of our insight states. As a reminder, we currently offer insights in California, Colorado, Nevada, and Washington. Looking at this chart, we can see the sales share of CBD products within the topical space over time. I do want to point out the compressed axis there on the y-axis. We're starting with a base of 50% instead of 0%. I've done this to help amplify the trends so that we can dig a little deeper, but I always think it's important to look at your axes as you're making decisions with data. I think the story here, that I see at least, is that in Washington and Colorado, we saw CBD products really gaining market share throughout 2016. However, in Washington, that trend has leveled off and perhaps turned slightly negative. This doesn't mean that sales were negative. In fact, there was positive growth of CBD products during this time. Rather, it means THC-only products were growing at a faster rate than CBD-containing products. In our 2 newer markets, Nevada, which legalized in late summer of 2017, and California, which legalized in 2018, we see both of the markets out of the gate favoring CBD-containing products. Perhaps topical manufacturers in those states were able to capitalize on the increased consumer interest in CBD products. If we think back to our search trends graph at the very beginning of this presentation, we know that late 2017 and early 2018 was where we saw consumer interest really spike for these products. Looking at the 2 newer states, we see that both have seen CBD products continue to grow their market share month over month. In looking at this graph, I think what is most interesting to me is the Nevada market, where we see sustained growth of the CBD space. If it's okay with you, Steve, I'd like the next stop then on this road trip to be Nevada. Let's go.
Excellent. Everybody loves a good old road trip to Las Vegas, right? Diving into the topical sales in Nevada, we see that the total market size last year was $7.5 million, of which CBD products comprised $6.4 million of that total. Again, folks, don't panic about that 2019 bar. It's a year-to-date bar again. In fact, just like before, we can look at that bar and be pretty happy knowing that so far this year, we are already at about 70% of the way to last year's total. Here, though, what I do want to point out is the difference we see in CBD products versus THC-only products. Something you can't see from this chart is the like-month sales growth for this year. I did a separate analysis, and when looking at January to July sales for this year compared to January and July sales of 2018, we see CBD-containing products have experienced about 40% growth. However, their THC-only friends have seen a contraction with a 7% year-over-year decline in sales.
Okay, quick question. The green is still topical sales, still in Nevada, right?
Yes, yeah. Everything on this chart is topical Nevada. It's stacked up with the purple being the CBD products and the green being those THC-only products.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
Absolutely. So looking at this data, I think I'm pretty sold that I want to continue to investigate the CBD topical market in Nevada. But before we move on, let's diagnose the source of the sales growth, just like we did for top-line CBD sales a few minutes ago. Here's where things start to get super interesting for me as an analyst. I hope they're interesting for you as well. If you remember before when we examined sales growth trends, we broke sales growth down into two components, growth due to increasing unit volume and growth due to increasing prices. For average CBD products in all markets, we found that growth was driven by both forces, but that unit volume growth was the bigger player. Here, what we see is quite the opposite. If we look at this graph, what we can see is the average item price on the y-axis, represented by the purple line, and the CBD unit share, represented by the red line and the right axis. We see that unit volume share has been relatively stable, perhaps even declining slightly from its 2018 highs. It looks to be relatively stable today at around 80% of the market. The sales growth story here appears to be in the average item price, which has seen pretty stable growth over time. We see that in 2017 and 2018, the average item price, I guess 2017 and early 2018, the average item price was ringing in at around $25, but has since increased to over $40 today. Before we get too excited about this trend and go making a lot of decisions, let's check to see if this trend exists in THC-only products as well. Basically, what I want to do here is see if the increasing price is a perk that CBD products are enjoying, or if THC-only products are also in on the fun. Here we're looking at the average item price of topicals in the Nevada market. I love graphs like this, Steve. They make it so easy for me to show clear trends without having to do a lot of digging.
Pretty clear diversion.
Yeah, it's pretty rare that you get something as clear as that. Again, I'll point out that compressed axis on the left-hand side. All right. Digging into this visual, we see increasing price of CBD-containing products is a trend unique to CBD products, with THC-only products actually seeing some price pressure over the last few months. It seems that perhaps the CBD consumer is slightly less price sensitive. I'll have to make a note to let my nanas know that their curiosity in CBD could come with a higher price tag. The last thing we can surmise from this visual is that THC-only products likely haven't had growth because their average item price has had so much price pressure over time. For CBD products, the opposite is true, with high growth due to the average item price nearly doubling in 2 years. Since this trip today is all about CBD, I'm going to dig down deeper into the pricing trend for the CBD products, but make a note to look into these THC-only products later, as I'm curious what could be driving this pricing trend. Another thing I want to point out here is this trend is not unique to topicals in Nevada. So you can't see it in this graph, but I know from doing analysis, in most of our categories, in most of our markets, we see a product that contains any amount of CBD will in general be priced higher than its THC-only counterparts. Not all markets have as clear of a trend, and not each category is exactly the same, but I would say it's a pretty common trend, though perhaps more muted in some categories and markets. Before I dive too much into price, because there are a lot of places to look as we do price analysis. But before we decide where to take our analysis next, let's quickly look at the product landscape so we can understand what types of products exist and whose price to look into. Firstly, I want to look into the segments that make up topical sales. The graph we are looking at here is the total sales by segment in the topical category in Nevada. If we look at the left-hand axis, we can see the total sales with the light blue part representing sales of CBD products and the dark blue part representing sales of the THC-only products. You might have to look a little close, Steve. Some of those blue bars are quite small. Here what we see is the category is mostly made up of lotions, salves, gels, and creams. For reference, there's an orange dot that belongs to the right-hand axis, which shows the market share of CBD products in that particular segment. So from this graph, I think what we can take away is that lotions are our largest segment, and that lotions and transdermal products are particularly dominated by CBD products. Looking at this trend, I'm pretty sure that I want to continue my analysis on the topicals category as a whole, rather than start diving down into individual segments. But just to be double sure of that, let's look at the trend over time to make sure I'm not missing something by looking only at the 2 most recent months, which this graph we've been looking at is. On our next slide, we can see the sales share of topicals in Nevada. We see that lotions have kept their portion of the lion's share of the pie over the time. I think this solidifies my intuition looking into the category as a whole is the way to go for the next set of analysis. So rather than taking our pricing story into segments, let's do something that I find more interesting and that I think tells a really great story. Let's look at the pricing as it relates to the package sizes. So here we're going to think of the package sizes as the total milligrams of THC in the product, and we're going to compare that to the ratio of CBD to THC. This is one of my favorite visualizations I have ever made. This is a product landscape chart. What we are looking at here is a heat map of sales in the CBD topical space in Nevada in the last 365 days. On the y-axis there on the left, we can see the ratio of CBD to THC in the product. So when you see 2 to 1, it means there's twice as much CBD in that product as there is THC. On the x-axis at the bottom, we can see the total milligrams of THC in the product. And finally, the graph is colored by the total sales volume of that particular product type. This graph is great for a whole lot of purposes. I think of it like the pledge of graphs. It's multi-purpose. It's a good pun, right? The first place I like to use this graph is when I'm trying to do white space analysis for product development. Here we can look at this graph to find potential holes in the marketplace. The white space on the graph above represents areas where no products exist. Some of that white space makes sense. For instance, we can't really go making a CBD-only product with 10 milligrams of THC. However, some white space could offer us areas for opportunity to examine if products should be made to fill that gap. For instance, we see that there are no 2 to 1 products in the 80 milligram or 100 milligram package sizes. Another really great use for this graph is for retailers. Here, a retailer can look at this visualization and compare it to what they know about their own product assortment in their store. For instance, if I'm a retailer and I don't have any one-to-one topicals on my shelf, I think this graph shows me that I'm missing out on a high sales volume potential, as the second and third largest segments in this space are one-to-ones. So looking at this, I think what I would decide as a retailer is I should definitely have some one-to-ones in my store. Today, we're going to use this graph to help us get a better picture of the CBD topical space in Nevada. So what I see here is that the largest segment of sales is for pure CBD products. The market further sees a lot of sales in one-to-ones, and those are broken pretty closely between 50 milligram packages and packages that have more than 100 milligrams of THC. This helps me refine the area of analysis I want to go next. If price has been increasing for the segment over time, perhaps it makes most sense to dig into just these 3 darkly shaded areas above. But before we do that, let's get an understanding of their prices. This is the same visualization you just saw. However, now, rather than looking at sales volumes, we're looking at the pricing landscape. I've filled in the prices of the 3 segments we know comprise most of the sales volume. Here, what we find is that pure CBD products, on average, are priced under $40, just under $40. And CBD and one-to-one CBD to THC products have a wide range of prices. with 50 milligram packages seeing prices around $12 and greater than 100 milligram packages seeing prices of over $50. I'm tempted here to get into an EQ pricing analysis, but I think rather than diving into EQ pricing, which we have some videos that cover that topic, let's look at the pricing trend for one-to-ones and CBD-only products, which we know are a large portion of the market.
Okay, so that's the top line on the visualization here.
The top line on the visualization are the one-to-ones, yeah, and so what this tells me is kind of the pricing as it moves over time. The darker things are priced higher. I do find particularly interesting that those 50 milligram package one-to-ones are priced what appears to be a lot lower than, for instance, a 80 milligram package one-to-one. So I think that this is a really great space to kind of dive in, maybe look at some of the products that are in there, maybe look at some of the brands playing in the space. And here you can get a really clear picture, not just of what's available, but maybe how should I price my products.
This is pretty intense, Liz.
Yeah, I like to get into it for sure.
Next slide. Yep.
Next slide, yeah, absolutely. Unless you want to keep talking about that one. Those are my favorite visualizations. I can talk about them all day.
Well, the two together are pretty compelling.
They are, for sure, yeah. I suppose in the interest of time, I'll have to move on.
Okay.
So I think from that last graph, what we saw was that CBD-only products and one-to-ones are where we want to focus our analysis. So in this last stop of our Nevada pricing journey, we see the pricing for CBD-only products as well as one-to-one products, which make up 90% of the total of the CBD topical market. We see that both of these are on an upward trend. So it seems across the board, CBD products are seeing greater sales and commanding higher prices at the register. Interesting to me here is that CBD-only products see a higher price point than those products with CBD and THC in them. This could be due to package size trends. We didn't dig too deep into the milligrams of CBD, oof, I really mixed them together there, of CBD, and we didn't dig too deep into the THC milligrams. But for now, I want us to steer out of Nevada and back out into all 4 states. What I'm most curious about is how does Nevada fit into the overall market, and are these trends the same, or is there something we could learn from the other markets? Now, Steve, I would like to say, as a typical analyst, I generally prefer my donuts glazed and not as charts, mostly because when I look at donut charts, I just get distracted thinking about how long it's been since I had a delicious donut. But in this case, I actually think donut charts are the proper way to represent this data and give us a really clear picture of the market. This slide is definitely going to take me a minute because there's a lot to unpack here, so everybody stay with me, though I have just got you thinking about donuts moments before lunch. I am very sorry for that. So firstly, what I'd like to look at is when we look at all these states together, the first thing I notice is that they're very, very different. We know from the analysis we just completed that Nevada is comprised mostly of one-to-one and pure CBD products. But it looks like that trend does not carry to other states. I think the thing that jumps out to me most is how many colors are on the other states' donuts here. This tells me the markets have much more diverse product sets than Nevada. Right now, this cross-state analysis is one of my favorite things to do. The difference between states is truly a fascinating trend to me, and not something we often see in more traditional retail markets. Imagine if you were analyzing something like paper towels or vitamins, and you saw that the package size trends varied widely between California and Washington. That would be very unusual. I think that this highlights just how new and exciting the recreational cannabis market is. Multi-state operators are still relatively rare in the marketplace. There definitely are some of them, and this is very much changing quickly. But right now, we tend to see trends pop up in states that don't quickly follow to other states. To me, this is an area ripe with opportunity. If you're thinking about a new product, looking to markets that you aren't in for inspiration is an awesome place to start.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no.
The 3-to-1s are very strong in California, have almost no representation anywhere else, and the 1-to-1s are strong in all states.
Oh, for sure, yeah. It's almost like each state is kind of a mini test market, and you can use this data as you're thinking about either going to a new state or launching products in your own state to try to understand all the trends. All right, anyway, back to the graphic. First, let's look at Colorado. Here, what we see is that 1-to-1s are the lion's share of the market there. And then there's just this rainbow of color that makes up the remainder of the graph. From here, I wonder perhaps if there's a major player that dominates the Colorado market in that one-to-one space, or maybe if any of these diverse package sizes are seeing more growth than one-to-ones, and maybe if that donut would look a little different next year. Let's move on next to California. What I find here interesting is something that Steve just pointed out. So the first thing I noticed is that there isn't a clear package size that dominates the landscape. We've got some pretty even splits there. We see THC heavy, 3-to-1s, and 1-to-1 products, each commanding nearly an equal market share. Here again, I wonder if there's some major products that are dominating in this space, or if it just so happens that this split of CBD to THC ratios is common across different brands and products.
I may be asking you to repeat yourself, but can you say a quick blurb about THC heavy?
Yeah, you know what, that's a fair point. I'm not sure if I brought that up, and I should have. So if you look at all of the ratios, you'll see that 1-to-1 is the most THC to CBD we list. Other than that, we're looking at products that have more CBD than THC, so 3-to-1s, 4-to-1s. THC heavy is where that ratio would be flipped. So a THC heavy would be like a 1-to-2 or a 1-to-5. In the topical space, THC heavy don't represent a very large portion, except there in California. However, that's not necessarily the case in edibles. While THC heavy isn't the most common in edibles, we do start to see things that are THC now with like a sprinkling of CBD. It's also a little more common in the beverage space in some markets. Topicals and tinctures, generally, we're looking more at those higher ratios.
Got it.
As we speak about higher ratios, I think now we should move on and look at Washington up on the top. So in Washington, again, we see no clear dominating ratio, but I see 2-to-1s and greater than 20-to-1s. So these are the opposite of our THC heavy. These are CBD heavy. This is CBD now with just a little bit of THC. These are the major players, and we don't see either of those have really much of a showing in any of the other states. It's interesting to me that in California we see a lot of 3-to-1s, and in Washington we see a lot of 2-to-1s. To me, I would think this is a great area of opportunity for research into the ratio that consumers most want to optimize the bang for your buck. If a 2-to-1 will do just as well as a 3-to-1, then perhaps we can use less CBD driving down our costs, or perhaps we can increase our prices on these 3-to-1 products. Quickly, before we draw too many conclusions here, I want to take us one step back and compare the segments that dominate these markets. We know that in Nevada, the segment is primarily comprised of lotions, but perhaps these ratios are different because the product landscape is entirely different. Perhaps in California, lip balms and bath salts are what are dominating and driving these trends. So if we look to the next slide, looking at this, we see that the year-to-date breakdown of sales by segment in each market, what I noticed straight away is that they appear to be fairly similar. Interesting to me is that while there is a smaller portion of their sales to lotions in every market, in general, the markets look a lot like Nevada. Maybe, Washington with that heavier reliance on transdermal products, maybe there's something there, but for the most part, these look fairly similar to me. So now what I'm wondering is, could the different CBD to THC ratios in products in other states be an area of opportunity for an entrepreneuring topical maker in Nevada? Digging deeper into each state would give me a clearer picture to help determine if these are areas ripe with opportunity. But alas, this fork in the road is where our journey ends, as this analyst, Steve, is almost out of gas. However, I encourage you to examine some of these paths to see if there is a road of opportunity for yourself. So Steve, I think that now it's time for me to wrap up. Let me give a quick recap of everything we've learned here today. So we started by looking at the total market size, and we saw that in 2018, the market was $244 million, and we saw that this is growing. Remember, already this year, we're up to 3/4 of that total at only 58% of the way through the year. We also saw that as of July 2019, 33% of non-inhalable sales were to THC-containing products. So this is a very big portion of the market, and we saw that that market share had been climbing over time, maybe stabilized a little bit more recently, but it's definitely a growing trend. Next, we started to explore some categories. Here, my takeaways were that each category is very different. So we saw that edibles were the largest portion of sales at already $62 million year to date. But categories like topicals and tinctures are where we see a whole lot of sales to CBD products. Both of those saw their sales volume at more than 80%. We next took that trip down into Nevada. Here we saw that prices of CBD products are growing much faster than their THC-only counterparts. I did bring up that seems to be the general case across most categories, though not all. And finally, we saw that sales growth among these products is increasing, mostly due to increases in average item price. That is actually a trend that is a little bit unique to topicals in Nevada. In general, a lot of that growth trend of CBD products in each of the other categories is actually mostly happening from unit share. We saw that when we looked at the top line trends. So there's a whole nother set of analysis here in any of these other categories that could help us understand unit volume going up, whereas today we looked at price. Finally, if we think about the prices we looked at, we saw that CBD prices are much higher than their THC-only counterparts, and we saw that pure CBD products are the majority of the market in Nevada, but not really maybe the major player in other places. And this is where we got into some of our ratio analysis, and we realized that the ratios are very different across different markets. So with that, what do you think, Steve? Does it seem like CBD is a big area of opportunity in the market?
Well, yeah, and if you and I are going to Vegas, we're not just going to get lotion and salve. Although I know that's what's going to be readily available.
For sure.
Now, you can't get this data out of our normal insights application.
Well, Steve, you know, I would like to talk about that actually, because we at Headset looked at this analysis and it seemed like CBD is growing really fast, and it seemed like putting CBD in your products led to a lot more growth. So we thought to ourselves, perhaps we should put CBD in our products. And so I think everybody knows where I'm going with this. You can probably guess. But I'm pleased to announce live on this webinar today that we are now offering a CBD Market Insights product. So Steve, perhaps you can tell people a little bit about this product.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. So using these CBD-specific dashboards, you'll be able to understand market share growth of CBD products and uncover the trends that drive it, similar to what we've been talking about today. You'll be able to discover potential areas for product innovation and growth opportunities. You'll recognize complementary products and segments. You'll be able to identify movements in pricing to increase profitability. You'll be able to predict how the diversity among segments resonates with consumers. You'll be able to determine how to better stock your store shelves to meet the shifting consumer demand. You know, that and a whole lot more. Now, these dashboards will be live starting on August 5th. If you're interested, send an email to sales@headset.io, and the team will be glad to talk to you about it. Now, Liz, we've been accumulating some questions over the course of the last little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Why don't you go ahead and take them?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first questions that we had was getting into the concentration of, I believe, of THC in the CBD topicals. So I think that one of the ways to think about price here is not just the price for the average items in general, but rather the price per milligram of THC in these products. So at Headset, we do often look at equivalized pricing. So equivalized pricing is the price per milligram of THC. We have whole videos that look just into that, but in the dashboards that we launched, there is an analysis of the price per milligram of THC as it relates to how much CBD is in the product. So that would be a great way to dive in a little bit more. What I can tell you off the top of my head, because I know, is that it isn't a perfectly linear trend, maybe like one would expect. So if we think that for 10 milligrams of THC, we get 10 cents a milligram. If it's a 1-to-1, maybe 20 cents, a 2-to-1, maybe 40 cents. It doesn't actually follow that trend. We see some peaks and some valleys. So perhaps there's a way to optimize your pricing based on ratio there.
Can we give people a peek at the...
Oh, yeah, we can absolutely give people a peek, for sure.
Stand by.
Everybody's antsy, huh?
There we go. Okay, let me return to my sharing here. I'll have that right back up for you. And share. There we go.
Great. All right, well, let me just take over your computers here a little bit. So what you're looking at is one of the dashboards in our CBD product set. People that subscribe to our CBD product will have access to 3 dashboards. There's one that's an overview of the CBD market. I'll take you through some of it real quick. You'll find a lot of very familiar graphs and charts in this marketplace, or in this dashboard for sure, because we used a lot of these in order to make our presentation today. One of the other 3 dashboards that I won't get into today allows you to dig deeper within the category. So on that one, you'll be able to select a category and see things like how are sales breaking down across those segments, how is the ratio and the prices, the ratio of CBD to THC and the prices affected. We can see where sales growth is, and finally we can dig a little deeper into some of the top brands and products in those spaces. And then finally, the thing that might be hotter than CBD itself, exportable data. We have a tab with some exportable data so that all of you analysts may put it in pivot tables to your heart's desire. All right, so quickly, in just a minute or two, I'm going to show you briefly what this looks like. If you're interested in learning more about it, I encourage you to reach out to our sales staff at sales@headset.io, as they are more seasoned demoers of a product than I. But as we look at this product, here we're looking at the Nevada market. You can see things like total share, again, breaking down sales growth into that average item price versus unit share. Here you'll recognize our category graph. This one right now is honoring my 365 date range and just the state of Nevada. So we do see it look a little different than what we were seeing when we had total markets in the presentation, Steve. Interesting to me here in Nevada is that only 10% of product sales in edibles are to CBD products. When you aggregate all of our states together, that's actually 20%. So to me, it looks like perhaps as an edible manufacturer in Nevada, I might want to start thinking about the CBD in my products and maybe look at other states and see if there's some areas for opportunity. Those product landscape charts that I did show you, those are available in the category section of these dashboards, so you can see it across segments and get just as clear of a picture of the marketplace. Here you can see the graph I spoke to with sales share. We do some analysis with price. Here's that EQ price that we did have a question about on the line. So if we look at topicals, what we see is the average price per milligram of THC for just the THC-containing products. If it's CBD only, Steve, unfortunately can't be included here. But for products that do contain THC, we see that the average price per milligram of THC in a CBD-containing product is 33 cents versus 29 cents for a product that contains only THC. These are things we would expect, right? There's extra stuff in there, so it should cost a little more. But to me, one of the interesting things is how different the topical dots look from the tincture and sublingual dots. Look at that price differential there.
There's a real premium there.
For sure, absolutely. And then actually in beverages, we see the opposite is true, with products that are THC only actually getting higher prices than products with CBD in them. So for me, a beverages analysis here would be a very interesting place to go for sure. We have box plots for pricing distribution. This is analyst wonk stuff right here. I'm not going to frighten you with it too much today, but us analysts love pricing distributions. So what this does is it takes the average item price at the top, which is just a point estimate of all the things put together, and it gives you a clear picture of how that price is distributed. So at a high level, without spending too much time, we can see in the capsules and in the tinctures market, there are a whole lot of different prices. Those lines are very big. And in beverages and edibles, those lines are much more compressed. So there's less space for all sorts of wild and crazy pricing here. This is a great way for you to understand if your products are priced in the mid-range, high range, or low range of the market. This is what I alluded to a little bit, Steve. So here we're looking at the EQ price by the ratio of CBD to THC. What we found interesting here was that nonlinear trend, right? So we do see a 1-to-1 gets 30 cents per milligram of THC, but a 2-to-1 gets 32 cents. So it is a price premium, but is it worth it? I'm not sure. I would encourage anyone looking at this to dig deeper down into categories and perhaps even segments to get a better picture. We do look a little bit at new products involved. Here are those donut charts that I loved so much from before. We have a Sankey chart, which is one of my favorite ways to show product landscape. So we could hover over, say, the 100 milligram package size in Nevada in the last 365 days and see that most of its sales are to one-to-one products, with that orange bar to the right. Though we do see just a little bit going into those THC-heavy 5-to-1s and 2-to-1s. We also see that these 100 milligram package sizes are mostly for edibles, as well as just a little bit there for tinctures. And then finally, we can see the ratio over time. I love this one. This is one of my favorites because what we saw was in 2017, sorry for this 2016 data, folks. This might not be respecting one of my filters up on top. In 2017, we see that the one-to-ones were, kind of a bulk in the market. We have starting to see a lot of pure CBD. These things are maybe changing over time. What's interesting to me is, again, all the rainbow colors you see today. So I think that's about as much of a demo as I can do without taking up too much time.
So as you go to survey some of the remaining questions we have with the time we have left, Liz, I just want to remind everyone that slides, this recording, and the cumulative frequently asked questions or the cumulative questions asked over the course of this session will be available after the webinar. So if we have your email, which I believe we needed to sign you up in the first place, we'll be distributing that so you don't have to reach out to us for that. Instead, reach out to the sales team at sales@headset.io and we'll help you. So what additional questions do we have?
Yeah, I'd just like to answer one more. So for my last question, I did have a question on canna-curious people. So what they were looking at is the number of consumers in legal states growing? I think basically they were trying to decide if CBD was a way that people sort of broke into the marketplace. We don't have any data that looks at that just yet. We don't have a particular report, but I do have someone from our marketing department in the room who I'm sure has written down that that's a report that people might be interested in. So perhaps we can look at that at another time. And I think with that, that is all of our questions. So what I'd like to say is whether you're interested in a one-to-one of this CBD product with your current Insight subscription, or you're more of a CBD-only consumer, reach out to our sales staff and they can help you out. That's that sales@headset.io. I think with that, I've officially worn out all of my metaphors, Steve. No more puns left in me, so it's time to put this to bed, bid you adieu. I'll let everybody get to their lunches. I hope this presentation has given you something to chew on at lunch. I had to do one more time.
Well, thank you very much. That's great, Liz. Thanks for joining, everyone. Watch your email for announcements of future data nights in your area and other webinars to come. Thanks for playing.